I still remember the first night I arrived near the abandoned military base, shrouded in a thin veil of fog that seemed to absorb every sound. The desert air was unnaturally still, carrying a faint metallic scent that made my skin prickle. I walked along the cracked perimeter fence, flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating twisted shadows of rusted vehicles and barbed wire. In the distance, a soft humming filled the air, constant, low, almost like the earth itself was breathing. Suddenly, pale lights blinked in the sky above, moving in ways that defied everything I knew. That's when I saw it, a shadowy shape hovering silently just beyond the tree line, its edges shimmering as if it wasn't entirely real. I never should have stepped closer. The fence stretched farther than my eyes could follow. Pale moonlight brushed over each rusted post, and the metal wires hummed softly, a vibration under my skin. Old vehicles lay scattered, half buried in sand, their shapes warped and quiet. The moon carved shadows across them, long and thin, like someone or something was moving just out of sight. I walked closer to the fence, fingertips brushing the cool metal. It buzzed faintly beneath my touch, a vibration that didn't belong to the wind. The desert smelled of dry earth and old oil. Every step sank softly into loose sand. I thought I heard it first, a faint rustling, and then the humming shifted, like the fence itself had sighed. I paused. The silence pressed against my chest, thick and sticky. The vehicles seemed to lean toward me, their shadows curling in the wrong direction. Something shimmered in the distance. Not a star, not a reflection. A pale light, shivering restless, slid along the horizon. I blinked, and it was gone. The hum of the fence deepened, soft now, like a low exhale. I tried to move, but my legs felt heavy, weighted by the cold night air. I traced the line of the fence with my eyes. The posts were evenly spaced, but then one seemed taller, twisted slightly, like it had been bent from something inside. A bird? I thought I heard wings, but the air was still, and the only movement came from the sand shifting quietly underfoot. The rusted vehicles creaked. A door sagged open on one, its shadow stretching far across the sand. I thought I heard soft footsteps inside, though the sand outside was untouched. I breathed slowly. The smell of rust and dry metal filled my nostrils. The wind carried nothing else. No plants, no animals, just a quiet hum. And still, the fence hummed, steady, patient. A shape flickered along the wire. Not a person, not an animal. Something thin and shadowed, gliding just beyond where I could see. I leaned closer to the vehicles, tracing the rusted contours with my eyes. The shadows shifted, though nothing moved. I could feel the vibration in my chest, like the earth itself was pulsing. I wanted to leave. Every instinct screamed to turn, to find solid ground, but my feet stayed rooted. A faint clink, metal against metal, echoed across the fence line. It was soft, almost polite, but the silence around it made it feel deliberate. The pale moon caught something in the sand. A small shape, thin, elongated, then gone when I blinked. The desert was empty, or at least, that's what it wanted me to think. The hum softened, almost like a whisper. I could feel it in my ears, in my teeth, in the pulse of my own heartbeat. I stayed perfectly still, watching the fence, watching the shadows, listening to the slow, measured breathing of the desert. Then the sand shifted again, tiny grains brushing across the tires. Something moved under the fence, slipping along the wire's shadow. So subtle, I almost convinced myself it was a trick of moonlight. I stepped back. The vehicles looked heavier now, their shadows pooling in the sand. I could smell the cold metal, the faint acrid tang of rust, and the desert still alive with hums I could not name. I turned, but the fence seemed endless in both directions. The moon hung pale, unmoving, and the soft vibration of the wire lingered, like a quiet heartbeat beneath the desert skin. I walked slowly, feet scraping sand, breathing the dry air, the hum following me as if it knew the rhythm of my pulse. And then I realized the fence didn't just surround the desert. It surrounded me, every rusted vehicle, every shadow, every whisper of sand and wire was waiting, patient, silent. I didn't want to move anymore. The desert kept its hum, and I kept my breath, and we both waited under the pale, endless moon. The hall was long, cold concrete under my fingertips. I could see my breath curl, in the pale light of the ceiling lamps. They weren't steady. Flickers danced across the walls. A pulse uneven, almost like the base itself was breathing. I stepped forward. The hum followed me, soft, low, as if it had no beginning. And with it, a whistling, thin, empty, like someone testing the silence. The shadows moved before I did, stretched into shapes that shouldn't exist. I caught them in the corner of my eye, gone when I turned my head. The metal stairwell rattled somewhere behind me, not from the wind, no breeze. I hadn't noticed the smell before. Ozone, rust, old wires. Each flicker of the lights made the walls twitch. Sometimes it looked like a figure, just for a heartbeat. I froze. The hum grew warmer, closer. I want to call out. My voice stuck in my throat. The whistling, it turned into soft words. I didn't recognize them, but they were familiar, somehow, like a lullaby I should remember. I touched the wall. Cool, smooth, vibrating ever so slightly. The shadows leaned into my hand, and the light above blinked faster. I moved deeper into the corridor. Soft footsteps echoed behind me, or maybe ahead. The air had weight, pressing against my chest. The whistling rose and fell, a tide I couldn't hold back. There was a doorway. I didn't remember it being there before. The frame warped in the flickering glow. I peered inside. Nothing, but the hum was louder, pulsing. The light stuttered. I saw it then. A shadow, solid this time, thin, stretching along the wall. It moved like water, and it followed me without sound. I wanted to run, but the base was a maze of cold hallways. I could feel the air thickening, filling every corner of my lungs. My hands trembled. The hum hummed, louder, and in the gaps of the flickers, I saw eyes. Not bright, not glowing, just watching. They disappeared before I blinked. The whistling wound itself into a song. Soft, empty, and I realized it wasn't coming from somewhere else. It was inside me, under my ribs, in my ears. A panel fell from the ceiling. Dust rose like fog. It smelled of metal and decay. And the lights above, they stopped flickering. Just pale, steady light. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. The shadow lingered. The hum faded into silence. The whistling went with it. The corridor seemed normal again. Too normal. The smell remained. The memory of the pulse, the flicker, the eyes. It clung to me. I touched the wall again. Nothing moved. Nothing whispered. But I could feel the shadow watching just beyond sight. And the lights, I knew they would flicker again. The sky was pale, almost gray, like the kind of morning that smells faintly of metal. I walked along the cracked tarmac, boots pressing into stones that whispered beneath each step. The hangar loomed ahead, vast and hollow, its edges swallowed by fog. The doors sagged, hanging crooked, moving slightly without wind. A thin hum of something, breathing or machinery, pressed against my ears. I stopped. The air felt thicker here, colder. Inside, the shadows stretched. They weren't still. They twisted along the walls, pooling in corners where the light failed. I thought I saw a figure, pale and thin, standing just beyond the reach of the weak sunlight. But when I blinked, it was gone. The floor was dusted with rust, flakes that crumbled under my fingers when I touched them. Each step echoed, too loud, bouncing off metal walls that smelled of oil and old storms. I realized the echo was slower than it should be, like the hangar was swallowing time. A faint scratching scraped across the far wall. I froze, heart quickening, ears straining. Then silence. I moved deeper, boots dragging through scattered debris. The air shifted, carrying a faint metallic tang, like iron and cold sweat. Shadows grew, forming shapes that weren't quite human, yet moved like they were alive. A soft gust made the doors sway again. I heard whispers, or maybe it was the wind curling inside, murmuring names I didn't recognize. Something brushed against my arm, light as a feather, and I jerked back. Nothing. I found the remains of old crates, broken and rotting. The wood was splintered, gnawed by time, but it smelled wrong. A faint, acrid smoke lingered, curling into my nose, making me cough softly. I thought about leaving, but curiosity, or something heavier, kept my feet moving. A corner of the hangar was darker than the rest, walls slick with shadow. The air hummed there, low and steady, vibrating through my chest. I reached it. A shape leaned from the wall, long and thin, bending in impossible ways. It didn't move, but I felt it watching. A chill crawled up my spine, and I realized I hadn't breathed in seconds. The doors creaked again. Soft, slow footsteps echoed behind me. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The light from outside was faint now, pale and trembling. Everything smelled of rust and cold cement. I pressed myself against a support beam, listening to the silence. Or maybe it was waiting. The shadows shifted once more, sliding across the floor like water. I felt the air thicken, sticky, almost wet. Every corner seemed to lean closer, watching. Then nothing moved. No breath, no hum, no echo. Just the empty hangar and me. I stayed until the fog outside began to thin, until the sun caught the edges of the doors. The shadows receded just enough to remind me they hadn't gone. And as I stepped back onto the tarmac, I felt the hangar's gaze linger. I walked away, slow and careful. The metal doors creaked one last time, softly, as if sighing. And I realized that some places are not meant to be empty. The room smelled faintly of dust and damp wood. Outside, the fog pressed close against the windows. It was early evening, but the light was pale, soft, almost hollow. The radio sat in the corner, old, its casing chipped. I hadn't touched it in months. Now it hummed, a low static, quivering like it knew I was watching. I leaned closer. A voice slipped through the hiss. Soft, almost a whisper. At first, I thought I imagined it. Then it became words. Fragments broken. My name. A question I didn't want to answer. The shadows along the wall twisted, folding in on themselves. I blinked, and they were still. The room held its breath. The hum changed. It became a tune. Melodic, subtle, but wrong. I could feel it under my skin, vibrating through my fingertips. I stepped back. The floorboards groaned beneath me. Outside, a branch tapped lightly against the glass. Inside, something shifted in the corner. I wasn't alone. I tried to focus on the radio. The voices grew clearer. They spoke in soft tones, weaving sentences I couldn't catch fully. A name, a warning, a plea. The static made it intimate, like it was crawling along the walls, brushing my ears. I moved closer, compelled, afraid. The hum became almost a lullaby. It wrapped around my thoughts, pressing against my temples. The shadows bent closer, responding to sound. I touched the radio. Cold, hard, unyielding. Yet inside, the vibration hummed through me. The voice called again. Closer this time. I could feel breath on my neck, though I was certain I was alone. The air thickened. Dust hung, suspended, motes floating in the weak light. The hum stuttered. Then silence. I couldn't move. Even my own breathing sounded loud in the emptiness. The corners of the room seemed darker, deeper, alive, waiting. Then the static returned. Sharper, quicker. The melody twisted. Notes I had known, but wrong. The shadows flickered. A pale shape, almost human, flicked past the edge of my vision. I shut the radio off. The hum died immediately. The room went cold. I pressed my palms to the floor. The wood was wet, though I hadn't spilled anything. But the voice didn't stop. It whispered from nowhere, inside the walls, under the floorboards. Soft, patient, persistent. I backed toward the door. The shadows followed, stretching, bending, almost smiling. My heartbeat filled the room, loud, erratic, but I dared not look. Outside, the fog had thickened. The street lamp barely pierced the haze. I wanted to run. I wanted the radio gone. But a final note lingered, melodic and soft. It wrapped around my chest. A name, my name, then nothing. Only the smell of dust and damp wood. Only the hollow, pale light. Only the quiet that was not quite empty. The sand was cold beneath my bare feet. Night had settled quietly, like a soft blanket over the empty dunes. The wind whispered to the fence posts, thin and restless. I noticed them first. Footprints. They appeared out of nowhere. Small, deep impressions in sand. leading away from the path I knew. No one should have been here, yet they were fresh. I crouched, feeling the granules slip through my fingers. Each print seemed deliberate, but there was no rhythm, no pattern I could follow. Above, pale lights flickered. They weren't the stars. They moved silently, drifting across the sky, shifting like slow smoke. Their glow was cold, almost antiseptic. They paused, then swept along the horizon again, never touching the ground. A rustling ran along the fence. I turned. Shadows stretched and bent, clinging to the wooden posts as though they were alive. One lingered longer than it should have. I blinked, and it was gone. Or maybe it had just hidden in the darkness I wasn't ready to see. I followed the footprints, step by step, feeling my heart beat in the quiet. The sand seemed to swallow them behind me, erasing any trace. I shivered. The air smelled faintly of iron and sea, though the ocean was miles away. The fence leaned suddenly. Or maybe it had always leaned. I couldn't tell. A soft hum rose from the distance, barely audible, vibrating through my chest. I imagined voices in the hum, but when I strained to hear, there was only wind. The footprints ended. At first, I thought I had reached the edge of reason, but the sand continued, smooth, untouched. Nothing but the stillness pressing in, and yet the feeling of being watched settled on my shoulders. Heavy quiet. I looked up. The pale lights had drawn closer, or perhaps I had drifted closer to them without noticing. They hovered now, flickering like candle flames in slow motion. Each flicker left a shadow that crawled across the dunes. I knelt, tracing one print with fingertip. It was too deep for a child, too small for an adult, too perfect to be accidental. The edges were sharp, as if carved by intention, a whisper of movement. Soft footsteps behind me, careful, cautious. I held my breath. My own footsteps seemed to vanish, erased by the fog rolling in from nowhere. The shadows along the fence shifted again, not with the wind. Something moved inside them, stretching tall, bending low, folding over itself. I blinked. The fence looked ordinary once more, but the hairs on my arms stood rigid. I walked forward, sand slipping beneath each step. The air had grown colder, carrying a taste of metal and wet earth. The footprints seemed to reappear in the distance. Yet every time I approached, they blurred, dissolving into flat sand. The lights hovered overhead, pale, calm, untouchable. I felt their gaze, not angry, not cruel, but curious. A gentle probing that made my teeth ache with unease. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. Time stretched. Moments became long shadows. The hum from earlier now thrummed in the ground beneath my knees. I thought I heard laughter, soft, hollow, but it vanished before I could recognize it. The air smelled faintly of burnt paper and cold smoke. I stepped back toward the fence. The shadows followed, bending unnaturally over the posts. One seemed to reach out, brushing a hand of darkness along my shoulder. I shivered, yet it left no mark, no warmth, nothing but the lingering brush of unease. Then the footprints disappeared entirely. No trail forward, no trail behind, only the empty sand, the pale lights above, and the whispering fence. I sat on the dune, feeling the fog wrap around me. The hum softened to almost nothing, and in that silence, I realized something strange. I had been alone, and yet I wasn't. The pale lights drifted higher, disappearing slowly. Shadows shrank back into the fence. The wind settled, but the feeling remained. Something unseen had passed this way, and maybe, just maybe, it would return. The barracks were empty. A pale light stretched across the cracked floorboards, thin and fragile. I felt it touch my skin, but it didn't warm. The air was still, yet the doors swayed. Soft, almost polite, like they were breathing. I stepped inside. The floorboards groaned under my weight, small complaints that disappeared as quickly as they came. A chill pressed against my bones, deeper than winter, older than the building itself. Shadows curled along the walls, long fingers stretching, retreating. They didn't belong to me, and yet I felt them brush my shoulder. I moved down the hall. My breath came in shallow whispers, filling the silence with myself. Each door whispered back, a faint hum, a sigh I couldn't place. The walls smelled of damp wood and rust. I traced a finger along a peeling corner. It left a cold smear, sticky with something that shouldn't be. One of the bunks creaked. I froze. The sound came again, soft, deliberate, like a pulse in the empty room. I couldn't tell if it was behind me or ahead. I didn't want to look. Yet the shadows swelled, darkening corners I hadn't noticed before. The floor was icy beneath my shoes. Cold seeped upward and my fingers tingled. I tried to shake it off, but the barracks wanted me to feel it. A door ahead groaned louder. I thought I could see someone leaning there. Not fully there. A shadow too thin for a body, curling like smoke. I walked past it slowly. The rustling of old blankets echoed. Every fold, every crease seemed alive, shifting, waiting. I felt eyes on me. Not watching, exactly. More like listening. The cold whispered through the cracks in the walls. I tried to focus on the light. It felt safe in the dark. But the light shivered too, flickering across splintered beams. I could almost see faces in the shadows. Familiar faces, then gone. A soft thud behind me made me jump. The door had moved again. No wind. No one. Only the silence that screamed. I crouched near a bunk, wanted to disappear. The air tasted metallic, like iron. My heartbeat drummed in my ears. Too loud. I swallowed it down. The hall seemed longer than it had been. I could hear my own footsteps, uneven, dragging. Then they slowed, stopped. I realized the echo had continued. After I had stopped moving, something passed close to my arm. I didn't see it, but the brush was real. A small, cold hand, or a shadow trying on my shape. I whispered into the emptiness, but nothing answered. The doors kept swaying. The shadows kept curling. The chill stayed. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to melt into the quiet, become part of it. But the barracks had other plans. It wanted me to notice, to watch. I reached the end of the hall. The last door hung ajar, more shadow than wood. I peered inside. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. The silence held me for a moment, then let go. I stepped out of the barracks. The cold followed me, lingering under my skin, through my clothes. I could still hear the doors swaying gently, as if waving goodbye. I never turned back. But even now, I can feel the shadows curling around the corners of my mind. And the cold is still there. The road was empty. Fog curled along the edges, soft and pale. Street lights flickered. One hummed quietly, its light wavering across the asphalt. I walked slowly, each footstep muted by the damp. Figures appeared ahead, not immediately, just shapes that lingered, far enough to make my skin crawl. They moved without sound. No shoes, no movement of fabric, just gliding. I stopped. The shapes froze too, long shadows stretching over cracked pavement. I could feel the cold settling deeper, like the fog pressing against my chest. A rustling came from the trees lining the roadside. I blinked. The figures were closer. Or maybe the road had stretched. They didn't walk. They drifted, limbs vague, edges smudged as though painted with mist. I wanted to call out. My voice wouldn't form. The hum started. Low, almost beneath hearing. But it resonated through my bones. A rhythm, slow, like a heartbeat. I stepped forward. They vanished. Only the hum remained. I reached the place where they had been. Nothing, just a fog curling higher, swallowing the ground. The air smelled faintly of rain and something metallic. I thought about turning back. The road stretched again. And there, at the curve, more figures. This time I saw them fully. Pale faces. Hollow eyes that reflected nothing. They didn't notice me. Or maybe they didn't exist to notice. The hum rose. I felt in my throat, in the soles of my feet. I edged closer. They vanished again. I pressed my hand to the lamppost. Cold metal, rough with rust. The wind shifted, whispered through the trees, brushing my cheek. A soft, almost hesitant footstep sounded behind me. I froze. Nothing followed. But the fog, it seemed thicker now, heavier. The road twisted unnaturally. I could see the figures again. This time, closer still, closer than before. Their eyes not empty, but wet, reflecting the faint lamplight. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. The hum was louder. I could taste it, bitter and coppery at the back of my tongue. They reached the middle of the road. A moment, just a pause. Then the hum shifted into something else. A sigh, or maybe it was my own breath. I stumbled, caught myself on the cracked curb. The figures, they were gone. I could hear them moving in the fog, soft whispers against the damp leaves. My chest tightened. I realized I had been following the road blindly. Not them, not even their shapes. The hum lingered, a thread, thin and taut. I kept walking, slowly, carefully. Every time I thought I was alone, the road would bend and reveal them. A flash of pale light on wet asphalt, a shadow that lingered too long that I stopped again. And this time, I didn't move. I let the fog press against my skin, the hum vibrate beneath my feet. The figures drifted past, closer than ever, but they ignored me. I could see the edges of their forms dissolving into the mist. A hand, not reaching, not touching, just hovering. I shivered. The hum fell silent. The fog thinned. Streetlights steadied. I took a breath. The road seemed normal now. Empty, silent. I didn't look back. But the hum returned, soft, almost playful, curling around my ears like smoke. I walked faster. Yet I could feel them, always behind, gliding just beyond my sight. The patrol would never stop. I don't think I would ever leave. The road bends again. Shadows stretch and twist. And somewhere, deep in the fog, the hum waits, always waiting. The fog hung low over the base. The night was cold, biting and still. I could hear my own breath shallow, trembling against the silence. A faint hum started somewhere above. Not loud, not sharp, but steady. I looked up. It was there, a metallic shape, hovering without sound. Pale lights blinked along its edges, like the slow pulse of a heartbeat I could not feel. The shadow it cast stretched over the ground, bending the darkness around it, swallowing everything. I stepped forward. The frost cracked under my boots. Each step felt heavier, though nothing pressed on me. Still, the air trembled with something alive, unspoken. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. The object moved, or maybe I did. The shadows swirled, small and large, folding in ways that made no sense. I could smell metal, sharp and cold, mixed with a faint tang of ozone. Soft footsteps echoed behind me, or perhaps in my mind. I froze. The lights blinked again, slower this time. Each pulse felt like it reached inside, tracing the edges of fear I thought I'd buried. I reached out. The air was colder than ice, yet it burned my fingertips. Nothing touched me, yet the pressure was real, bending my chest, my spine. The object hovered, patient, silent. A rustling behind the crates made me spin. Nothing there, only the shadows stretching, pulling, whispering promises I could not understand. The hum changed, subtle, almost alive, like it knew I was watching. I tried to breathe, tried to move. My feet stuck, as though the ground had grown roots. The lights blinked in unison again. I realized they were counting, or waiting. A cold wind pressed against my neck. The smell of burning plastic mixed with wet earth. I wanted to speak. The words dissolved before leaving my lips. Time seemed wrong. Seconds bled into minutes. But the object never faltered. Every glance back showed in the same place, yet closer, looming in a way that felt impossible. I remembered the cameras, the logs, the warnings nobody ever wrote down. Everything made sense, and nothing did. The lights went out for a heartbeat, then flared bright, exposing the ground, the rusted barrels, the frozen mud. Shadows bent and twisted toward it, crawling over themselves, slow, deliberate. I stepped back, felt the frost grip my ankles. The hum became almost a voice, or maybe I imagined it, whispering through the hollow of my skull. Alone, it seemed to say, alone with me. The pale light caught a glint of metal beneath the object. I couldn't look away. It shimmered, impossible angles reflecting nothing I recognized. The air shimmered with heat I couldn't feel. I wanted to close my eyes, to run, but my legs refused. The object hovered, waiting, watching. Then it shifted, the shadows with it, bending one last time toward me. The hum faded. The lights blinked slower, dimmer, like a heartbeat losing strength. The cold didn't leave. The silence didn't leave. I turned away, finally, but the image lingered. Pale lights, the bending shadows, the weightless presence pressing at the edges of thought. And somewhere behind me, I swear, something moved. Following, I left the base with my boots cracking over frozen ground. The fog swallowed the tracks almost immediately. But I know, it waits. It hovers still. Always. The hallway smelled of damp concrete. Windows long broken, letting in streaks of pale light. Dust drifted slowly, like the air itself was holding its breath. I stepped inside the lab. Equipment lined the counters, humming faintly even though nothing was plugged in. It was impossible. A shadow stretched across the wall, long and thin, moving slower than I was. I could hear the metal of a chair creak. Somewhere behind me, the whisper came next. It was soft, almost like a memory brushing against the edge of my mind. I turned, but the space behind the counters was empty. Glass beakers rattled, as if stirred by unseen fingers. The smell of old chemicals made my throat tighten. I breathed shallow, careful not to disturb the silence too much. The whisper returned, closer now. I couldn't make out the words, just tones, rising, falling. A fog had begun to gather near the floor, curling around my ankles. It smelled faintly sweet. I could see my reflection in a shattered monitor, pale and trembling. I reached for a notebook on the counter. Pages crinkled under my fingertips. Lines of calculations scrawled hastily, some smeared as if by tears. The hum in the room grew louder, but it wasn't electrical. It thrummed through the floor. I pressed my palm against the cold metal. Something moved in the corner of my eye. A figure? Or just a trick of the shadows? I froze, listening to the soft scrape of footsteps that didn't belong to me. The whisper was stronger now. A voice, broken, delicate. It spoke in fragments, numbers, names, something I couldn't remember later. I noticed the walls pulsing lightly, faintly, like the building itself was breathing. The scent of rust and wet paper filled my nose. I swallowed, unsure whether I wanted to. A drawer slid open slowly, on its own. Inside, instruments I had only seen in textbooks gleamed dully. I reached toward them, and my fingers brushed something wet, cold. The whisper softened, curling around my ears, tracing along my spine. I shivered, and for a moment, the lab felt endless, stretching beyond walls. The hum and whisper became one, a rhythm I couldn't follow. I turned back toward the hallway. The fog rose quickly now, soft against my skin. Shadows leaned closer, but never quite touched me. A light flickered overhead, weak and pale. It revealed something on the far bench, an old photograph. Face faded, eyes hollow. I didn't know if it was human. The whisper faded to nothing. Only the hum remained, slow and steady, like a heartbeat I could feel in my chest. I exhaled, trembling, tasting metal in my mouth. The lab was empty, or maybe it had always been this way. The fog clung to the floor, and I walked out carefully, leaving the hum behind. Outside, the pale sunlight felt sharp, unnatural after shadows. I glanced back once. The lab was still, but I could swear it breathed. The grass was damp under my fingers. Mist hung low, curling over the uneven earth. The air smelled of wet metal and decay. I found the bunker half buried in the hill. Its door was wrapped in rusted chains, the metal groaning when I brushed against it. A pale light seeped through the cracks, thin lines like fingers reaching out. I leaned closer. The shadows behind the door, they weren't still. They twisted, slowly, deliberately, like they were waiting for something. The ground beneath my boots trembled, not from wind. A hum lingered in the air, low and steady, soft as a breath that didn't belong to me. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. A scrape, a pause, another scrape, and then silence. The chains rattled under my fingers. I could almost feel the texture of the metal biting my palms. A smell, old iron, damp soil, something burned, filled my nose. The light flickered. Shadows stretched. And just for a heartbeat, I thought I saw a face leaning against the inside of the door. No features, just a hollow space, darker than the night. I wanted to step back. My boots sunk slightly into mud. The The scent of wet earth was suddenly sharp, almost choking. Something moved again. Soft, slow footsteps, echoing, but not quite mine. The wind picked up. It carried whispers that weren't words, hissing over my ears, slithering down my neck. I reached for the chains again. The metal shivered beneath my touch. Coldness spread into my fingers, like ice running along bone. I tried to push. Nothing. The door wouldn't budge. Only the pale light shifted, casting elongated shadows across the hill. I imagined what waited inside. Eyes that followed, breath that mirrored mine. Every rustle of chain felt like a warning. Every pause of wind a shudder through my chest. I crouched low. The smell of damp and rust filled the small space between me and the door. A soft vibration hummed through the ground, almost like a heartbeat, but not human. I stepped back slowly. The shadows didn't stop moving. They twisted toward the light, toward me, stretching across the grass. The wind fell silent. The hum disappeared. Even the mud seemed to hold its breath. I couldn't tell where the shadows ended and the door began. The pale light shifted again, casting one final finger of brightness across the chains. It glimmered, briefly, like it knew I was watching. And then, nothing. Only the faint smell of wet earth remained, and the door locked tight. The shadows lingered behind it, twisting in ways the light could never reach. I walked away slowly. Each step pressed into the damp ground, echoing softly in the empty night. I didn't look back, but the bunker stayed in my mind. The chains, the pale light, and the feeling that whatever was inside was still awake, still waiting. The basement smelled of damp metal and old oil. A single bulb swung, throwing pale light across the cracked concrete floor. The hum was there before I noticed it, low, insistent, a heartbeat in the dark. Shadows shifted along the walls, stretching, crawling. I could almost see them breathe, curling toward the corners, retreating with the flicker of the light. The air tasted thick, metallic, and cold against my tongue. The machine sat in the center, quiet at first. Then the hum grew, vibrating through the floor, up my legs, into my chest. Soft footsteps I didn't take echoed somewhere above me, but the house stayed still. I pressed my hand to the metal casing. It was warm, vibrating under my palm like it had a pulse. The smell of burnt wires mingled with the scent of damp stone, sharp and clinging. The lights flickered again, in time with the hum. 1 second. A shadow stretched long across the wall. The next it recoiled, folding on itself. It was impossible to tell if it was mine or something else. A thread of static hissed in the air. I thought I heard words, soft and broken, drifting in the vibration. Not speech. Not yet. Just murmurs, almost beneath hearing. The hum throbbed. I could feel it behind my eyes, behind my ribs, like it wanted me to notice. And I did. I could not. Something shifted near the corner, quiet but deliberate. The light caught a metallic edge, glinting then gone. The air smelled warmer here, closer to the machine, almost alive. I stepped closer. The hum was louder now, almost a voice. Shadows slithered along the walls, pulling at the edges of the light. Each flicker made the space seem smaller, tighter, pressing in. I pressed my ear against the casing. The vibrations danced through my skull. A soft tapping joined the hum, rhythmic, like fingers drumming slowly against some hidden skin. I froze, breath shallow. The light skipped again. I swore the shadow moved against the flow of it, backward, resisting the flicker. My fingertips tingled where I touched the machine. It pulsed alive. The hum didn't stop. It grew, subtle and maddening, whispering without words. I could almost see shapes forming in the darkness, melting with the shadows. I wanted to look away, but my body refused. A soft shiver ran down my spine. The floor seemed to pulse under me, a low vibration spreading to my knees. The air turned thick, sweet with something I couldn't name. Static prickled along my arms. And then silence, not the absence of sound, a pause, deliberate, like holding breath. The machine stayed, humming softly again, lighter now. The shadows curled back into themselves, shrinking toward the walls. The air smelled cleaner, colder, as if nothing had moved at all. I wanted to leave. My legs moved before my mind could catch up. The hum followed me, faint now, fading into corners of the basement. The light swayed, catching the edges of rusted metal, pale and patient. I glanced back once. The machine waited, silent, but I knew it wouldn't stop humming. Not ever. The corridor smelled faintly of damp concrete. A single flickering light above painted the walls in uneven gray. I had stayed late, checking the cameras one last time. The security monitor glowed, pale and steady. And then a blink, not from me. A camera in the corner shifted. Its red light pulsed slowly, like it was breathing. I could feel the hum before I heard it, a low melody vibrating through the floor. Shadows leaned against the walls in ways they shouldn't. One stretched across the ceiling, thin and crooked, then snapped back into place. I swallowed. My throat felt heavy, coated in something dry. I tried to tell myself it was a reflection. The hum deepened. It wasn't just sound. It vibrated through my chest. The monitor flickered. I saw shapes, pale impossible. One shadow moved against the flow of light, bending the edge of the room around it. It paused, watching though I could not see eyes. I held my breath. Footsteps, soft, not mine. They circled behind me, then stopped. The hum became a melody now, fragile, like wind through glass. Each note trembled along the walls. The camera blinked again, faster, quicker. A door at the end of the hall groaned. Or maybe it had been me imagining it. Every sound seemed alive, waiting to stretch into the dark. I stepped closer to the monitor. Shadows on the screen were no longer just shadows. They flickered, multiplied, and then paused mid-motion, impossible, bending on themselves. I could smell something metallic, rusted iron, warm and sharp. The hum merged with a whisper, melodic, soft, but clear enough to pull at the edges of my mind. I blinked. The camera rotated again, its red light no longer steady. It pulsed erratically like a heartbeat, and the shadows leaned closer, folding the room into shapes I could not name. I wanted to move. My legs refused. The air was thick, vibrating against my skin. A brush of cold near my arm. Not wind, not fabric. The melody grew, yet it was hollow too. Notes that should not exist filled the empty space between the walls. I realized the camera was not watching the room. It was watching me. I wanted to look away, but I could not. Each flicker on the screen carved the shadows sharper, taller, more deliberate. They reached where the light dared not go, curling around corners, sliding over the floor like water. The hum softened, melting into silence. I could hear the room breathing, and in the pause, the camera blinked once more, and everything stopped. The shadows froze mid-step. The hum vanished. Even the stale smell of iron retreated. The monitor glowed steady again. I was alone, but the red light of the camera stayed, pulsing slowly, watching. I didn't move. The hall beyond the monitor stretched, empty, silent. And yet I knew I would return, and the camera would be waiting. The desert was empty. Night draped over the sand like a thin, cold cloth. The wind whispered over the dunes, shifting grains that sparkled faintly under the pale moonlight. I had been walking for hours. Each step sank softly, leaving a fleeting imprint. The air smelled dry, like old stone and something else faint and metallic. Then it started, a pulse, slow at first, almost imperceptible, vibrating to the soles of my feet. I stopped. The desert seemed to hold its breath with me. Shadows stretched long across the dunes, twitching as if alive. The pulse came again, stronger, and this time a light flickered far ahead, small, bright, like a star trapped just above the sand. It pulsed in sync with the rhythm under my feet. I wanted to call out, but my voice caught in the dryness of my throat. The wind carried nothing but the hum, persistent, vibrating through my chest. I moved closer. The shadows seemed to ripple across the dunes, folding in on themselves. I could see shapes, long and thin, darting just at the edge of my vision. The light grew, not high, not in the sky. It hovered low, almost floating, its pulse steady, hypnotic. Something clicked in the silence. The stars above blinked in time with the pulses below. Every grain of sand seemed to vibrate with the same cadence. I crouched, brushing my fingers across the sand. It felt alive, cold, smooth, and almost breathing. Then, from behind, a soft rustle. Not wind, not sand. Soft footsteps, careful, deliberate. I froze. The pulses didn't falter, but the shadows now moved against the rhythm, stretching in impossible ways. Shapes that shouldn't exist seemed to bend into corners of my eyes. I blinked, and the desert seemed ordinary again. Only the hum remained, deep and thrumming. The light pulsed brighter. I thought I could see forms inside it, thin, twisting figures, barely there, caught in the glow. They didn't move like living things. They moved like echoes of movement, stitched into the air. I wanted to run, but the sand held me. Each pulse made my chest ache, a strange, pressing rhythm. The wind whispered louder now, or maybe it was my own breath. Shaky and hollow, the pulses shifted, faster, urgent. The light stretched into a thin line, crawling across the dunes. The shadows fell backward, like they were fleeing something unseen. I stumbled, half blinded by the glow, and then silence. The hum vanished. The light vanished. The sand fell still under the pale moon. I was alone again. Only the faint taste of metal lingered in the dry air. The footprints I had made vanished. Or maybe I had never walked at all. Above, the stars twitched. One blinked in time. A reminder that somewhere out there the pulse continued. Watching, waiting. I did not move. The desert stayed silent. And I stayed listening. The fog had settled thick across the field. Morning light tried to break through, pale and hesitant. Everything smelled damp like old metal and earth. I walked slowly. My boots sank into wet grass. The hum came first, low, steady, vibrating through ground. It wasn't wind. It was a machine. It was waiting. A figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. Tall, rigid, a uniform I almost recognized. It didn't move, didn't breathe, or maybe it did, but silently. The air around it shimmered, as if reality had thinned. I blinked. It was gone. Only the mist remained. But shadows lingered, long, twisted, reaching toward me. They moved in ways the wind shouldn't allow. Rustling that didn't belong to leaves tickled my ears. I felt the cold crawl along my neck. The hum grew, soft at first, a thread beneath my ribs. Now it throbbed, insistent, filling the spaces between thoughts. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. A shadow shifted closer. Not the figure. Something else. A helmet glinted under the pale light. Soft footsteps echoed, then vanished. My breath quickened. I smelled iron, blood, or rain-soaked soil. I thought I saw the figure again. Far away, half hidden behind a twisted tree. The edges of its form flickered, like candlelight caught in a breeze. I raised my hand. My fingers trembled. By the time my eyes focused, it was nothing but fog, silence. The hum lingered, stubborn, almost conversational. I felt my heart beat in it, small and fragile. The ground beneath me seemed hollow, waiting to swallow sound and skin alike. Shadows stretched toward the horizon, unnaturally long. Some of them didn't follow the trees or rocks. They moved independently, twitching, curling, whispering in shapes I could almost understand. I knelt. Grass clung to my palms, cold and damp. The smell of wet earth was stronger now, choking, metallic. The hum became a chant in my chest. I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't stop hearing it. The figure returned, faint, farther than before, closer than it should have been. Its face, I couldn't see a face, just a helmet, a shadowed form, something hollow beneath. I whispered my own name. No reply, except the hum, a soft footstep right behind me. I dared not turn. My spine ached with the expectation of contact. Nothing touched me. Nothing moved but the shadows. I stumbled forward. Grass and mud sucked at my boots. The light shifted. The sky, the fog, everything felt thinner. The figure vanished again, and the hum became unbearable. I crouched. A cold wind carried whispers, too soft to catch, too close to ignore. Breath froze in my throat. The shadows stretched, retracted, coiled. I wanted to call out. I wanted to run. But I was already being watched, already a part of it. Then silence fell. The fog thickened, swallowing sight, sound, distance. The hum faded, leaving a ringing emptiness. The figure was gone, and yet I felt it everywhere, in the soft stir of air against my cheek, in the shadows that didn't belong to anything, in the steady echo of my heartbeat against the damp earth. I turned to leave. Nothing followed. Nothing remained, except the sense that I had been seen, that somewhere, far away or close, the soldier waited, silent and patient, to appear again. The sand was cold beneath my fingers, pale in the moonlight. A fog lingered over the dunes, curling around each ridge, soft and slow. I could hear the whisper of the tide, far off, brushing against the emptiness. There it was, a drone, shattered, bent like it had tried to fold itself into the sand and failed. Flickering lights pulsed weakly, as if it were breathing, tired and confused. I leaned closer. The glow made small shadows jump across the grains. Rustling, something shifted, and I froze. I could smell the metal, burned and sweet, curling up into the night air. It hummed faintly, not alive, but alive enough to make the hair on my arm stand straight. The wind carried a soft scratching, like tiny feet skittering just beneath the surface. I thought I saw a shadow rise from the drone, thin and trembling, dissolving when I blinked. The silence after was heavier than the fog. I could feel it pressing against my chest, slow, deliberate. Each pulse from the drone seemed to match my heartbeat, lagging behind, hesitant. I reached out, but the sand crumbled beneath my fingertips. Cold, damp, almost sticky that a soft clicking began. The lights dimmed and brightened, like it was calling or warning. My shadow stretched across the dunes, bending oddly, broken where the drone's glow flickered. I could smell salt and smoke together. Sharp and bitter, I crouched closer. The edges of the drone looked carved, jagged like the bones of some forgotten creature. I ran my hand over the surface. Cold metal, sharp plastic, and something soft, almost warm, beneath the shards. The hum rose, low, vibrating in my teeth. I stepped back. My breath came out in visible puffs, twisting, vanishing. A movement caught the corner of my eye. Something small and pale slipping out from under the drone's shadow. It paused, waited. I didn't breathe. The flickering light seemed to linger on it. For a moment, it was clear, shaped almost like a hand or a claw, reaching, then gone. The tide whispered again. A pale light glanced off the shards, and the sand seemed to ripple, restless, alive. I felt the vibration under my feet, soft but insistent. The wind carried a smell of ozone, electric and harsh. The drone's pulse slowed. Or maybe I just noticed it. Attuned, afraid. I wanted to move, to run. My legs wouldn't obey. I could hear faint rustling behind me, closer than it should have been, but empty when I turned. I knelt again, letting my hands brush over fragments. A soft static hum from the drone, almost a whisper. I thought I could hear my name. No one spoke it, not aloud, not human, just the air. Shadows stretched taller as the moon shifted. The fog thickened, brushing my neck, smelling of wet sand and something deeper, older. The flicker of the drone's lights was almost hypnotic, slow and uneven. I tried to step back. Something caught my ankle, a small mound of sand, quivering, receding when I kicked at it. The hum softened. The lights faded. All that remained was the broken shape, lying there like it had always belonged. I rose. The fog seemed to sigh. The shadows settled. I didn't look back, but I know it is still there, shivering in the sand, waiting. The desert was empty. Cold air rolled over the sand, carrying a hint of metal and dry earth. Night had settled like a weight. I was alone, though the world felt thicker, heavier somehow. Stars hovered above, pale and indifferent. Then the lights appeared, at first faint, flickering like fireflies. They moved without sound, gliding across the dark sky. Not like any plane I'd seen, not like anything I could name. Shadows stretched toward them, long, thin, bending like they were alive. My chest tightened, a low vibration resonating through my ribs. A hum, subtle but insistent. It filled my ears, my thoughts, my heartbeat. I wanted to step back, but my feet were heavy. The sand beneath me shifted, whispering. Every small movement echoed, though nothing else stirred. The lights drifted lower. Closer now. The pale glow caught on the edges of the rocks, casting impossible shapes. I swore I saw something crouching in the shadows, waiting. Or maybe the shadows themselves had moved. It was hard to tell. The hum grew, not loud, not like a noise, but inside, vibrating my chest, my teeth, my skull. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block it, but it was inside and outside and everywhere at once. A sudden flicker. One light dipped behind a dune. The shadows leaned toward it, stretching across the sand, reaching. I felt their pull, the subtle tug at my skin. The desert seemed to breathe around me, slow and deliberate. I whispered, I don't know what. Maybe my own fear, maybe the desert. The air was too thin, too dry for words, but the hum answered anyway. The lights move again, dancing slowly now, almost playfully, above a distant ridge. I could see patterns, geometries that made no sense. Triangles, circles, shapes that should not exist in the open desert sky. I tried to blink them away. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of my eyes. But the shadows, they bent toward each shift, a silent choreography. The air shimmered with cold and static, brushing my skin like a pale finger. I took a step back. My foot sank into sand that wasn't just sand. It hummed beneath me. The vibration spread upward. I froze. The lights hovered. No sound, no warning, just an unnatural glow that filled the night. For a moment, I could almost breathe again. Almost. Then one flickered closer, stopping just above the ridge. A strange clarity in its glow. It made the world sharper and thinner and quieter. I could hear my own heartbeat like a drum. I could smell the iron in the sand. I could taste the cold air, metallic and thick. And then it was gone. The hum vanished, leaving only the emptiness of the desert night. Shadows fell back into their normal places. The sand lay still, indifferent. I stayed where I was, staring at the place the lights had been, listening to the quiet that had returned, heavier than before. The desert seemed larger now, endless and watchful. I did not move. I did not breathe too loudly. I just waited for nothing, or maybe for it to return. The hangars smelled of oil and cold metal. Even the floor felt damp beneath my shoes, as though I had been waiting. The doors groaned slowly. No wind. Nothing moved outside. Just the doors, groaning, like something heavy pressed against them from the other side. Shadows stretched along the walls, long, thin, reaching. I thought I saw one curl, as if it had weight. Then it flattened. Nothing, again. A whisper brushed past my ear. Not loud, not clear, just a syllable, or maybe it was a name. I didn't answer. The hangar lights flickered, pale, hesitant. Every time the light shivered, the shadows seemed to lean closer. Soft footsteps echoed. Or maybe it was mine. Hard to tell. I moved toward the center, careful not to breathe too loudly. The air was thick with dust and rust. My fingers brushed the cold metal of a beam. It vibrated faintly, humming under my touch. Something shifted behind the far crates. A slight scuff against concrete. A shadow peeled away from the wall. Then stillness again. Silence heavy enough to taste. I tried to remember why I was here. The emptiness made thought slippery. Every corner held a weight, pressing, patient. I could smell the faint oil, like a ghost of machines long gone. The whisper came again, closer this time. Soft, almost shy. I froze. It circled me, touching my skin, cold and fleeting. The doors groaned once more, louder now. The sound lingered like a sigh, deep and tired. I pressed my back against a crate. The shadow moved again, slow and deliberate. I could see its shape reflected in the dust motes dancing in the pale light. It was wrong, not human. The hum in the metal rose, high and thin. My heartbeat drummed against it, slower, trying to match. The hangars stretched and curved in the corners of my eyes. Nothing was stable. Nothing was safe. Then the whisper stopped. Silence, sharp as a knife. The shadows froze in place, as if listening. I held my breath and heard my own steps echoing, alone, against a vast, empty space. The lights blinked once more. I glimpsed movement in the far corner. A pale shape, dissolving like smoke. It didn't chase. It just waited, always waiting. I wanted to leave. Every instinct pulled me back to the doors. But they didn't move. Heavy, closed. The hangar didn't want me gone. I took another step. The whisper returned, so soft I could barely hear it. A name again, or maybe mine. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The hangar swallowed the sound of my shoes. The shadows pressed closer. And still I walked forward, past the empty crates, past the hum of metal, past the soft, patient weight of waiting. The doors groaned once, final. And then silence. The room was heavy with evening fog, drifting into the cracked window. Shadows pooled near the corners, long and thin, almost reaching for each other. I had been sitting quietly, tracing the edge of the worn carpet with my fingers. The lamp on the table shivered. A flicker, then another, not like a dying bulb, but like it remembered something it had forgotten. The light danced across the floorboards. Shadows bent, twisted. They stretched like smoke curling from forgotten fire. I held my breath. The hum began, low at first, a soft pulse, almost melodic, threading through the quiet. It made my chest tighten. Each beat of it seemed deliberate, patient, watching. I wanted to look away, but my eyes kept drifting back. The lamp's glow pulsed again, casting shapes that didn't belong. A shadow lingered where none should. It trembled at the edges, a pale echo of something human. The floor felt colder beneath my feet. I could feel the hum of my bones, vibrating softly, insistent. The air smelled faintly of metal, of rain against concrete. And something else, something sweet and decayed, curling at the edges of the room. The lamp flared, a wave of brightness that made the shadows leap violently across the walls. Then darkness swallowed them again, leaving only the slow, steady hum. I moved closer, drawn by it, but my hands wouldn't obey. They trembled in my lap, soft rustling along the floor. Not from me, not entirely. Something small, shifting, almost brushing against the carpet. A pause, then the flicker again. The light bent in ways it shouldn't. Walls grew angles I hadn't noticed. Corners deepened into black hollows, swallowing the familiar. I could smell the fog now, thick and wet against my skin. Each inhale tasted faintly metallic. I whispered to myself, but no words came out, just the hum. The lamp pulsed again, a slow, steady heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, I thought I saw it, a shadow curling just beyond the table, thin and long. It stretched toward me, careful, almost shy. It hesitated at the edge of the lamp's glow, and then it recoiled, vanishing into the corners, leaving only the soft pulse of the hum. I felt the floor shift beneath me, not physically, but in some way my mind couldn't place. The room felt smaller, the air closer. Every breath I took trembled with it. I couldn't look away from the lamp. It flickered again, this time slower, deliberate, like it was breathing, like it was alive. A soft knock, or maybe a scrape. Something sliding along the far wall. My skin prickled, every nerve tight, alert. The shadows twisted one last time. A long, pale line across the carpet, curling toward the table. The lamp's hum swelled, a gentle rising tide, soft and melodic, as though coaxing something from the dark. I felt a warmth against my hand. Or was it cold? I couldn't tell. The lamp dimmed, flickered, then stayed. The hum faded. The shadows lay flat and still, obedient. I wanted to move. I wanted to speak. But I didn't. I stayed, watching the lamp, feeling the residue of what had passed. The room smelled of metal and wet fog. And I knew if I blinked, it would all start again. The desert wind was cold tonight. It swept across the base in slow, heavy gusts, carrying the grit of sand that clung to my skin. Fog had crept in earlier, unannounced, thick and silent, swallowing everything. I walked past the empty barracks. Each step pressed into sand that had already been flattened, only to rise again under my weight, soft and reluctant. Shadows twisted inside the fog. They were wrong, curved in ways that shouldn't exist. A pale light pulsed through the haze. Not steady, not rhythmic. It flickered and vanished, leaving the world dim and hollow. I thought I saw a shape move, slender, almost leaning. When I blinked, it was gone. The fog carried a scent of iron. Not blood exactly. Something deeper, ancient. It lingered in the back of my throat, like the taste of a dream I couldn't place. I kept walking. Footsteps echoed softly, but not mine alone. Sometimes I thought I heard a whisper, a breath through the fog that wasn't mine. I stopped. Nothing. The base's lights barely pierced the gray. They hummed quietly. A static vibration ran through the ground, under my boots, through my bones. I pressed my hands to the metal railing of a catwalk. Cold, rough, solid, and yet I could feel the fog pressing back, as if it wanted inside me. Shadows curled around the edges of the lights. They moved differently than shadows should. Too quick, too precise. I thought I saw fingers, long and thin, reaching, retreating, tracing lines I could not follow. I stopped at the edge of the supply yard. Boxes stacked high, covered in dust and sand. The fog shifted again. A shadow stretched across the stacks, then split into two. Or was it always two? My chest tightened. A soft hum rose, low and constant. It vibrated in the air, in the fog itself. It made the lights pulse. It made my teeth ache. I wanted to move, but my legs refused. I could hear it then, soft footsteps behind me. Not on sand. Not human. Careful. Deliberate. I didn't turn. The fog pressed against my back like cold breath. A faint glow appeared far across the yard. It was pale, almost white. I thought it beckoned me, but my mind whispered to stay, to wait. The fog thickened. Every sound, every breath, became distant, like underwater. The shadow moved again, slender and wrong, a smear of darkness that shouldn't exist. I could feel it pass near me, not touching, but heavy in the space it occupied. My skin crawled. I swallowed. Only a dry rasp came out. Then silence. The hum vanished. The pulsing light faded. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath. I was alone. The desert wind returned, soft, sifting sand between my fingers. The base lights flickered weakly. Nothing moved. I took a step. Another. The fog thinned. Those shadows lingered at the edges. I turned back toward the barracks. Everything looked as it should, but the scent of iron stayed. And somewhere, beneath the sand, the fog, I knew the shapes had not left. I walked faster. The fog whispered behind me. I didn't look, and then I reached the gate. The wind carried the desert's emptiness into the base. The shadows had receded for now, but I could still feel them watching. From just beyond the pale light, the tower rises before me. Its silhouette slices the pale morning fog. I feel the cold in my fingers, and the stone beneath my boots hums faintly with each step. The base is empty. Only rustling leaves answer me. Even the wind seems hesitant here. I pause at the foot of the steps. Shadows cling to the stone, pooling like dark water. They shift when I blink. I can't tell if it's the fog or something watching from inside. The first step is a soft groan beneath my weight. The hum resonates, low, almost like a whisper. It moves with me, curling around my ankles. I hesitate, feeling the air thicken, carrying a faint smell of rust and cold stone. I climb slowly. My palms brush the rough, wet walls. Each finger leaves a smear, like dust on glass. The hum grows, subtle, then a sharp tremor that vibrates my teeth. I try to focus on my breathing. It's shallow, quick, and I can feel it echoing. Halfway up, I notice the cracks. Dark veins in the stone, branching like old scars. Something stirs behind them. Not a shadow, not quite, but a movement I can't name. I press my back against the wall. The hum changes tone, pulsing, vibrating through the floor. The wind shifts. I hear soft footsteps, or maybe it's mine repeating back to me. The tower swallows the sound, stretches it. There's an empty weight here, a pause where the world falls silent. The top comes into view. Pale light seeps through cracks in the walls. It's not sunlight. It's the color of dust caught in a street lamp. I step onto the final rung. The wind bites, carrying the sharp scent of damp earth and metal. I reach the platform. It creaks under my weight. The hum is all around me now, circling, distant but inside my chest. I lean on the railing. Shadows twist across the valley below. They move like long fingers, creeping through the fog. A bird, or something, rustles in the distance. Then silence. Only the hum in my breath. I lean closer to the edge. The world tilts beneath me. The fog swallows the base entirely, and I realize I can't see the bottom anymore. I notice the cracks in the tower floor. Thin, black lines running like veins. A faint pulse, almost imperceptible, seems to echo through them. It draws my eyes, hypnotizes. The hum matches it now, a slow thrumming time of my heartbeat. I step back, but the platform shifts underfoot. The rail wobbles. I grab it. Cold, slick. The metal smells like iron and old rain. The wind whispers something, brushing past my ear like fingertips. I freeze. The shadows on the far side of the tower stretch taller. I can't tell if they're leaning toward me or away. The hum climbs. It vibrates through my skull. Soft footsteps or wind. Tick closer. I hear breathing that isn't mine. I want to turn around, descend, leave this place. But my feet are locked. The air tastes thick. The fog seeps through my clothes, settling under my skin. It carries voices I almost recognize, but cannot place. A flicker of movement across the tower's edge. I look down. The fog shifts. Something pale, elongated, drifts just beneath the platform. I blink. It's gone. But the hum remains. I step away from the railing. The tower feels alive now, quivering beneath my hands. Each stone thrums, vibrating like a low pulse. I run my palm along the wall. The hum reverberates in my fingertips. I taste dust, rust, and something darker. I want to leave. I start down the steps, each one echoing. The hum follows. Soft footsteps join mine, or merge with them. I dare not look back. By the time I reach the base, the fog is thickened. It clings to my clothes, my hair, my skin. The tower looms above, silent now. The hum lingers faintly in the air, settling in my chest, in my bones. I turn away, but its shadow stretches beyond sight. It waits, always there, hollow, patient, unmoving. And when I close my eyes at night, I hear it again, a soft vibration, rising from the floorboards, creeping up the walls. The tower hums, always humming. The sand was cold beneath my feet. A pale wind slid across the beach, carrying salt and something older. I saw it then, the sign fallen, its letters half buried, jagged edges catching the dim glow of distant lights. Shadows leaned toward it, long and slow, stretching across the sand like they were reaching. I wanted to step back, but my feet stayed pressed into the grains, heavy. The lights in the distance pulsed. Faint at first, then sharper, almost like a heartbeat. I tried to tell myself it was just a lantern, a boat, some forgotten lamp, but it felt different. Watching, waiting. I crouched near the topple sign. The wood was damp, rough against my hands. A faint smell, metallic, like rust and rain, clung to it. Something shifted behind me. A scrape, soft, hesitant. I didn't breathe. The air was thick with salt and an unspoken tension. The pulsing lights flickered again. Closer now. Or maybe the shadows had moved. It was hard to tell. I traced the letters on the sign with my fingers. They were familiar, but not. Words I thought I remembered, twisted, wrong. The fog rolled in slowly. It swallowed the edges of the sand, curling around my legs, chilling through my shoes. Each step I tried to take forward made no sound, no imprint, just the hum in the air and the lights. I leaned down, rested my palm on the sand. The grains were cold, wet, whispering as they slid to my fingers. I imagined the shadows shifting closer, closer still. A sudden rustling from the fallen sign. Not wind, not sand. Something moving beneath it, or maybe inside it. The pulsing lights stopped. And then one blinked, sharp, sudden, cutting through the fog. I felt in my chest. Not fear. Something quieter. A recognition. I stepped back. The sand resisted, sticking to my shoes. The shadows had grown. They weren't just stretched anymore. They were shapes, leaning, observing. A faint whisper drifted across the beach. I couldn't understand it, but it carried weight. Old patient. I tried to move, To leave, the fog thickened, hiding the path I'd come from. The sand slipped beneath my feet, soft and yielding. The sign loomed behind me, larger than before, letters jagged, shadows curling around them like smoke. I stopped, and the lights pulsed once more, a heartbeat in the distance. Or in me, I realized I wasn't alone. Not really. Not with the wind. Not with the fog. Not with the sand that seemed to breathe beneath my fingers. I touched the sign one last time. It was colder than the air, colder than the fog, and the shadows stretched even further, pulling toward me, silent, patient. The lights faded, leaving only the faint outline of the toppled letters. I could feel the beach holding its breath. And I stood there too, alone, as the pulse of the unseen watched from afar. The wind whispered. The sand shifted. The sign waited. And I didn't move. The desert was silent. The sand glowed pale beneath the moon, scattered like cold ashes. I followed a path I didn't remember walking, my boots sinking softly, the night wind brushing my face. Somewhere ahead, a shape broke the emptiness. A jeep, rusted and half buried in sand, leaned slightly to one side. Its metal gleamed faintly under the pale light, shadows twisting along its curves, almost alive. I stopped. A hum filled the air. Not loud, just enough to press against my ears, vibrating to the soles of my feet. The tires were gone. The doors hung crooked, creaking softly when the wind caught them. The windshield was shattered, jagged glass reflecting the moon in fractured patterns. It looked abandoned, and yet somehow not empty. I took a step closer. The sand shifted differently here, denser, as if hiding something beneath. My fingers brushed the rusted hood. Cold. The hum grew softer, or maybe I leaned in too far to tell. Inside, shadows pooled. They moved against each other, stretching, shrinking. I blinked, and the shape seemed to pause, almost waiting. The smell hit me then. Stale metal, dry earth. Something else. Something that had been here too long. I circled the jeep slowly. Every turn revealed another twisted angle, another shadow that didn't belong. The hum pulsed with my heartbeat, low and steady. I pressed my hand against the roof. The metal shivered beneath my palm, almost like it was breathing. A soft scraping came from the driver's seat. I froze. The night seemed to hold its breath. The wind stopped. I want to call out, but my voice felt wrong in the emptiness, swallowed by the still desert. I crouched, looking through the shattered windshield. Something glimmered in the back seat. A pair of eyes? Or just the reflection of the moon on rust? I couldn't tell. The hum pulsed again, and I swore I heard whispers layer beneath it. A soft footstep or a shifting shadow. I turned, heart thudding in my throat. Nothing. Only sand drifting like smoke across the empty plain. The jeep seemed larger now. Closer. Its rusted frame hunched over me, as if leaning to watch. I felt the hum deep in my chest, vibrating through bone. The desert smelled sharper, tangy, metallic. I stepped back. The shadows inside shifted again, slower this time. They stretched long fingers across the cracked leather seats, brushing invisible dust. My hand clutched at my jacket, pulling it tighter. The air tasted dry, bitter, like it had waited for me. A whisper of movement behind the jeep now. Soft, careful. I turned sharply. Nothing. The desert remained still, but the jeep, it wasn't. Its door rattled slightly, though the wind had died. I wanted to leave, but my feet felt sunk, trapped in the sand and something colder beneath. The hum rose, then fell, like a sigh that didn't belong to the world. I pressed my palms over my ears, but it didn't stop. I blinked against the pale moonlight, trying to remember the path I had come from. And then I saw it, a shadow detaching itself from the jeep, slow, crawling across the sand. No legs, no arms, just a stretch of darkness, reaching, moving. I stumbled back. The hum dipped, then rose again, carrying a faint, hollow laughter beneath it. The air pressed down on me, warm and dry, smelling of metal and dust. I didn't move. Couldn't. The jeep waited. The shadow waited. And the desert, it whispered around me, soft and endless, promising I wouldn't be alone for long. The hum faded. The sand drifted over my footprints. And I knew, even if I ran, the jeep would be there, waiting. The alley was narrower than I remembered. Sand pressed against the edges, soft but unyielding. The walls leaned in, almost touching at the top. A pale light flickered along the curve, catching the ridges of the sand and stretching long. Thin shadows that seemed to breathe. The air smelled dry, metallic, like rust left to rot on the sun. I could feel it on my tongue, sharp and bitter. The hum began softly at first, a low, steady pulse that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. It was almost comforting. If I could ignore the unease and the bones of it. I stepped forward. Footsteps barely whispered over the sand, but behind me, it felt like something, was keeping pace. A wind stirred the dust, curling around my ankles, sniffing through the cracks in the stone walls. The shadows deepened, clinging to the bends in the alley. The hum swelled and receded, matching the flicker of the light ahead. I thought it was a lamp, or maybe the pulse of something alive, just out of sight. I stopped. The air felt heavier here. Every inhale tasted of metal and sand. I could almost hear it sigh. Something brushed against the side of my leg. Not hard, not like a person, but soft, deliberate, like a finger tracing along the skin. I froze. The walls seemed to shift slightly. Not move exactly, but swell as if the alley itself was aware. My breath came uneven, shaking the silence into pieces. A faint light throbbed in the distance, not quite ahead, not quite behind. It pulsed, slow and irregular, and with it, the hum deepened, resonating somewhere behind my chest. I wanted to turn, but the curve of the alley felt endless, like it was swallowing the path behind me. Soft rustling moved through the sand, but I saw nothing that belonged. I stepped forward again. The sand whispered beneath me. The walls, too, seemed to whisper. Every shadow stretched longer than it should. Every bend seemed sharper, and the alley narrower than memory allowed. The pulse of light stuttered, then slowed, then stopped. The hum flattened into silence, a quiet so complete it pressed against my ears. A faint breeze carried something, a scent like old smoke and something sweet I couldn't place. It lingered at the corners of my nose, filling the alley with a weight I couldn't move. I wanted to run, but the sand had begun to cling to my feet, soft and unresisting, yet unyielding, like the earth itself was claiming me. Something shifted just ahead. I couldn't see it, but I could feel its shape, leaning from the shadows, waiting patient. The light flickered one last time, and then silence. The hum was gone. The alley was still, and the shadows, nothing moved. I was alone, yet not alone. The sand still whispered. The walls seemed to breathe, and somewhere, faintly, the pulse began again. The desert stretches, endless and pale, under a waning sun. Fog curls along the cracked earth, thick and slow, like it's remembering something I cannot. I walk away from the base, each step stirring dust that smells faintly of metal and dry decay. Shadows linger near the edges of my vision, just beyond the reach of the fading light. I do not turn. I have learned the hard way that turning can invite more than clarity. The hum begins again, patient, insistent. It rises from beneath the sand, from the bones of the base itself, or maybe from the air. I cannot tell. It is neither loud nor quiet, just there, brushing against my eardrums like cold silk. The windows of the base stare back at me, hollow, reflecting the pale glow of the horizon. I imagine someone inside, waiting, but the doors sag, cracked and rusted, unvisited. Still, I do not feel alone. A breeze moves through remnants of broken equipment, rattling a loose panel against the wall. The metal sighs, soft like an apology. I smell the faint tang of rust, metallic, sharp, weaving into the dryness of the desert air. I stop. The hum does not stop. It follows. It follows because it knows where I am going. Or perhaps it waits for me to understand that going means nothing here. The fog thickens. I reach out with a hand, and it slips through my fingers, cold and damp. It smells of sand, of shadows, of something I cannot name. Every step forward feels heavier, as though the air itself is weighing me down. I see movement in the distance, just a flicker of shadow that bends strangely with the fog. I do not run. There is no place to run to. The desert is infinite, and the base is always behind me, whispering through the wind. The hum pulses in my chest, a quiet rhythm that is mine and not mine. I feel it in my bones, vibrating through the soles of my boots, through the small fractures in my skull. It does not demand. It only waits. A piece of glass catches a dying light. I see my reflection fractured, doubled, tripled, lost in the fog. I stare for too long, the cold biting at my cheeks. The desert does not care about reflections. I hear footsteps, or think I do, soft, deliberate, echoing against the emptiness. I do not move. The air is too still for anyone to approach. Yet I feel it, a presence that curves around me, invisible but tangible. The base is behind me now, its hum blending with the wind. I glance over my shoulder. Shadows lean toward me, patient, watching. I do not need to see them clearly to know they are there. I taste dust on my lips, dry and metallic. The fog clings to my skin, leaving a chill that I cannot shake. My eyes water slightly, not from cold, but from something heavier, recognition, maybe, of what this place has always been. A bird, small, pale, schemes through the air, wings scraping against the mist. It disappears too quickly, swallowed by the fog. I am alone, and yet I am not. The hum grows softer now, but it does not fade. It changes subtly, like a voice beneath layers of static. It is no longer behind me. It is within me. I stop again, sinking into sand. It presses against my legs, cool and unyielding, grounding me in a reality I cannot name. The shadows edge closer, but they do not touch. They simply exist, patient, waiting. I realize then with a quiet clarity that the base may never truly be abandoned. It is not the building, the metal, or the sand. It is the presence, the hum, the eyes that follow from nowhere and everywhere. It is patience itself, folded into fog, into shadow, into the endless stretch of the desert. I breathe in slowly. The hum fills my lungs. I am heavy with it, with the quiet understanding that leaving does not mean escape. It simply means moving within its domain, always observed, always followed. The wind shifts. Dust spirals around me, small and sharp. I close my eyes, and I let the hum settle into me. The base is behind me, but I feel it everywhere. I step forward into the fog. The shadow stretches along with me. The desert exhales, and I am absorbed into its patient, eternal presence. I walk. The hum walks with me. I do not resist. It has waited. I am here. The night was thick with fog. It curled along the path, hiding the ground beneath my feet. Every step felt softer, swallowed. The gate appeared through the mist. Metal bars cold and dark. Locked, solid, unyielding. Shadows shifted behind the bars. Slow, twisting, almost deliberate. I felt the chill of their gaze before I even saw them. The smell of damp earth pressed into my nose. Wet leaves stuck to my shoes. A faint hum lingered, low in my chest. I pressed my hand against the metal, cold, rough with rust. It would not move. Something scraped across the gravel behind me. I froze. Nothing. Then the hum returned, quieter, closer. The fog swirled unnaturally, wrapping around the bars. It made the shadows move differently, elongating, curling. I thought I saw fingers reach, pale and thin. The wind shifted. It carried with it a sour, metallic scent, like rain on old iron. The shadows twitched, then halted. I crouched, trying to see beneath the fog. Soft rustling, faint footsteps circling the gate. I could feel the eyes upon me. The lock was stubborn, etched with scratches, as though it had been tried before. Someone or something waiting patiently. A whisper drifted through the mist. Impossible to catch the words. Only there, soft, brushing against my thoughts. I drew my fingers along the bars again, cold pressed into my bones. The shadows pulsed, stretching toward the fog, hesitant, watching. The ground beneath me shifted with the moisture. I could feel it sucking at my shoes. The hum softened, almost like breathing. Something moved in the corner of the yard. Quick, almost hidden, then gone. I stayed crouched, listening to the fog wrap and twist around the metal. The air smelled faintly of decay, distant and yet close. My own heartbeat thudded too loudly in the quiet. The shadows quivered, then retreated slightly, hiding again. The fog thickened, swallowing shapes, erasing distance. I imagined hands pressing through, but they never came. I stepped back slowly. The metal remained cold, locked, patient, waiting. The hum faded entirely. Silence pressed against me. I could hear my breath, shallow, uneven. I turned away. The fog swallowed the gate completely. Shadows lingered at the edges, twisting, patient. And I knew they would wait. As I walked away, the cold metal stayed behind me, silent, unmoving, watching.